might have some mental health issues, has 3 children, is married, and has found herself in the midst of an affair. And she is now pregnant. What might that woman do, especially nowadays? Very likely she would be counseled to have an abortion by her friends or whatever. Well, the year wasn't now, the year was 1960, and that woman was my mother. You guys got me emotional tonight. What the heck? I don't usually do. So anyways, abortion was not legal then, and I suppose my mother could have tried to find a backstreet one, but chose not to, and chose to face up to what had happened, and was going to have me. Her marriage failed. Her husband left her a single mother of 3 with 1 on the way, and divorced her. My father did step up and married her, but it was a very volatile marriage, and it did not last very long. My mother, in the first grade, I moved like 3 or 4 different times while they were in the midst of the divorce, and finally my mother decided that my father probably could care better for me and cared more about me, and let me go with him, which was very unusual back then because fathers didn't usually get custody of children, but my mother was willing to do that. So I went to live with my father and never see my mother again. I've not seen her since, and that's like 41 years. My dad, 6 months later, remarried a woman, and they started having children not too long after that, and she was very much, I had to do a lot of cleaning, that kind of thing, and honestly, you guys, I thought I was Cinderella. I had the wicked stepmother. I could so relate to Cinderella, and so my childhood wasn't very happy in that sense. By the age of 11, I had tried to commit suicide by the grace of God, but it didn't work, and by 13, I had run away. Again, by the grace of God, I feel I didn't get to where I was going, and my sister, who was older, came and got me, and I went back home. Life didn't get much better, so I started experimenting with alcohol. My dad was an alcoholic, so there was alcohol around their house a lot. Started experimenting with alcohol and some drugs. And the one thing I didn't do, though, was I did not get promiscuous, because I had been told the story of my mom being somewhat promiscuous. My dad had found her having sex with some other man, and that was part of their divorce. And basically, I felt my mother was a whore, and so I was not going to be like her. So I made sure that was something I didn't do. Life went on. I graduated from school and moved out right away because I didn't like living there. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to keep that purity going, and had started dating and finally had sex for the first time, that kind of thing. And over the next couple years, I had a couple boyfriends, and then I finally found one that I thought was the one. And probably within a year of going out with him, I was on birth control, found that I got extremely crazy on birth control. It made me nuts. And I needed to go off of it. I can't recall what we were using, condoms or what, but I found myself pregnant. Unlike my mother, I made a choice. I never thought I would make that kind of choice. I had a girlfriend in high school. That was about the only exposure I had had to abortion, who was about 5 months pregnant. When her parents took her to have an abortion, and when she came back and talked about it, she talked about it so clinically and so without emotion. I just couldn't believe what she was telling me. But from that was the only experience I had. My parents never talked about abortion. I had not really heard much about it. So needless to say, I found myself pregnant, and my boyfriend at the time was, you're gonna have an abortion. There wasn't even a question about it, and I didn't think I wanted to do that. But, and trust me, when I talk about this, I'm not blaming him. I take full responsibility for what I did. But because of my past and stuff, I really was scared of losing him, and thought if I didn't do it that I would lose him. And so part of the fear of losing him pushed me towards that decision of having an abortion. Well, the one thing I did know, which wasn't much, was I wanted to get this done as soon as possible before it got very big. And when I called, I was about 6 weeks, and they would not take me. And they said, you can't come until you're 8 weeks because it's safer for you. And later I found out it's more because it's easier for them to have the fetus be a little bit larger. So at 8 weeks, my boyfriend took me, and as we were walking up the steps, back then people could stand on the steps and tried to talk to you. I remember one sole man there that day. It was kind of a cloudy, rainy day, and he tried to talk to me, and everything in my being wanted to talk to him. I stopped for a split second and started to listen when my boyfriend grabbed my arm, said some obscenities at the man, and pulled me inside. As soon as we got through those doors, I felt the most oppressive feeling I have ever felt in my life. It was very bright in there, but yet it seemed so very dark and cold. And there was, Carla described it fairly well. There was lots of people around. No one was talking to each other. No one was looking at each other. It takes hours. You would think you go in and you just have it done, but it takes hours because they get all the paperwork done and the so-called counseling and all done. And then the doctor comes in later and then just doesn't bam them like that. When I went in for the counseling session, she asked how I was doing about this, and I said I wasn't sure, which I would think would be red flags to a counselor, that this girl wasn't sure about what she's doing. But she proceeded to talk to me and tell me it was okay to do it. And then I brought up the man outside. And I said, what about him? He had at least got out how it was a baby. And she said, no, they're just fanatics. Don't worry about them. It's just a blob of tissue. And okay, there's some guys here tonight, so this might be too much TMI for you, but I'm just going to tell you what she told me. She said, you know how you get your period and you might have some stuff that comes out that looks like blood clots? She said, that's all it is. That's all it is. And so I hung on to that. And I proceeded to go through the procedure. It is very painful. Yes, they said it was just going to be cramping. It's extremely painful. Yes, there was women crying in the recovery room when I went in there also. And the kind of person I am, I'm used to stuffing things, so I went home, stuffed it, never talked about it again, and went on with my life. I wish I could say that was the last time I went into that clinic, but it unfortunately was not. A year later, with the same guy, I found myself pregnant again. This time, I did not want to have an abortion, and I told him that. And we were actually engaged and had bought a house together and were just in the process of moving in. He was pretty adamant about not wanting it. I verbalized my concerns and that I didn't want to do this, and again, the fear of losing him. But I also have to say that I think the not being able to have my big wedding like I planned, and that kind of, and letting my parents down, which I think is ridiculous. We were living together, like they didn't know we were having sex. It's ridiculous, the thought process of that. But needless to say, the decision was made that I would have it, another one. And so that time, I can honestly say, the whole way there, I cried. I cried and cried and cried the whole way there, which did not make my fiancé very happy. Pretty much the same procedure went on. I felt that oppression again when I walked in. The one thing that happened that time was I remember a girl going in for counseling, and she came out of the counseling crying, walked right past the reception desk and right out the front door. And I so wanted to follow her. And it was like something was pushing me and keeping me in the chair I was in. I just so wanted to follow her. But I didn't.